What would you do if every one of your brothers decided to go to war? Would you stop them? Would you go with them? Or would you promise that no matter what happens, you'd never leave each other's side? In the small town of Waterloo, Iowa, there once lived 5 brothers: George, Francis, Joseph, Madison, and Albert Sullivan. 5 sons of humble parents, 5 boys who grew up together, fought together, laughed together, and swore an oath stronger than blood itself. We stick together, no matter what. They were inseparable. From the dusty roads of their childhood to the roaring battles of the Pacific, that bond would become both their greatest strength and their ultimate tragedy. It was 1942. America was still reeling from the attack on Pearl Harbor. The country was furious, united, and desperate for revenge. Across the nation, young men lined up to enlist, eager to fight for freedom. Among them stood the Sullivan Brothers. All 5. Not one stayed behind. Not one hesitated. They didn't want to be spread across different ships or units. They had one condition for joining the Navy: we served together. The military had never seen anything like it before. 5 brothers demanding to be stationed side by side. It was against policy. It was risky. But the Sullivans' determination, their unbreakable sense of family, moved officials to make an exception. And so, in January 1942, the Sullivan brothers were all assigned to the same ship, the USS Juneau. They were proud. They were smiling in every photograph, standing shoulder to shoulder in their crisp Navy uniforms. The people of Iowa celebrated them as local heroes. 5 brothers serving America together. A symbol of unity, a symbol of love, a symbol of everything worth fighting for. But what no one knew was that their loyalty, their decision to never be apart, would lead to one of the most heartbreaking losses in U.S. naval history. Imagine being a parent, watching not one, but all 5 of your sons sail off to war. Would you be proud or terrified? Would you sleep at night, wondering if you'd ever hear their voices again? Because for Thomas and Alida Sullivan, that nightmare was real, and the news they would one day receive would shake the entire nation to its core. If you believe the world needs to remember the cost of brotherhood, if you believe sacrifice like this should never be forgotten, then make sure you subscribe, because this story will haunt your heart and make you question what true loyalty really means. The year was 1942. The world was at war, and the Pacific Ocean had become a battlefield of endless blue. Calm on the surface, deadly beneath. On board the USS Juneau, 5 brothers stood together for the first time in uniform. George, the oldest, always carried himself like a leader, the one who looked after the rest. Francis, confident and quick to smile, kept morale high among the crew. Joseph and Madison, known as Joe and Matt, shared a quiet bond, often finishing each other's sentences. And Albert, the youngest, looked up to his brothers with pride that could light up the darkest storm. They had trained hard, laughed often, and carried one shared promise in their hearts: we go together, we come back together. But as the Juneau set sail for the South Pacific, that promise would soon be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. At first, life aboard the ship was full of excitement. The crew was young, eager, and full of patriotic fire. They shared jokes, swapped letters from home, and dreamed of victory. The Sullivans quickly became local legends among their fellow sailors. Everyone knew them. The 5 brothers, always together in the mess hall, always side by side during drills. Some even said, "If you see one Sullivan, the other 4 aren't far behind." Their unity lifted spirits. To the rest of the crew, They were living proof that family could exist even in the middle of war. But war has a way of changing everything. It starts quietly, a whisper in the wind, a rumor over the radio, and before you know it, peace becomes a memory. By mid-1942, the Juneau joined a naval task force bound for the Solomon Islands, a place that would soon become one of the most brutal battle zones in the Pacific. The brothers wrote letters home, assuring their parents not to worry. "Everything's fine here," they said. But even through their cheerful words, the fear was beginning to grow. Because deep down they knew, war was never fine. They saw distant flashes on the horizon, gunfire between ships they couldn't yet see. They heard the rumble of aircraft above the clouds, and they began to understand what every soldier learns too late. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's standing your ground in spite of it. One night, as the crew gathered for dinner, the ship's intercom crackled with urgent orders. The calm routine vanished. "Battle stations. Enemy contact ahead." The Sullivans locked eyes with each other. Not a word was needed. They ran together, hearts pounding, ready to defend the ship they called home. From the upper decks they could see explosions lighting the sky miles away. The Juneau was entering the fight. For the first time, the brothers faced what they had only imagined in training. Real combat, real danger. The Pacific was vast, but in those moments, it felt painfully small. Every sailor knew the risks. Every man prayed to see another sunrise. As the ship sailed deeper into enemy waters, the nights grew quieter. No one joked as much anymore. Even the brothers, always full of life, began to speak in whispers. George wrote in his diary that week, "We'll stick it out together. We always have. Mom and Dad, don't worry. We'll be home soon." Those words would later become a symbol, not just of one family's hope, but of what it truly means to serve. They didn't fight for glory. They didn't fight for fame. They fought for each other. Because when you've grown up side by side, when your lives are woven together by years of laughter, fights, and forgiveness, you don't think twice about standing next to your brother, even in war. But fate doesn't make exceptions for love or loyalty, and soon the ocean would demand its price. What happens when the bond that keeps you alive is the very thing that puts you in harm's way? Stay with me. The Battle of the Solomon Islands begins, and what the Sullivans face next will change the U.S. Navy forever. November 13th, 1942. The calm waters around the Solomon Islands were about to explode into chaos. The USS Juneau and her crew, including the 5 Sullivan brothers, had just joined Task Force 67, a group of American warships ordered to confront a powerful Japanese fleet near Guadalcanal. For days, rumors spread among the sailors. A major confrontation was coming. No one said it out loud, but everyone felt it. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound louder than a cannon. The Sullivans didn't show fear. George tried to keep the crew calm. Francis cracked small jokes, and Albert, the youngest, said quietly, "We'll be fine. We've got each other." But deep inside, they all knew this would not be like any other night. Shortly after midnight, the silence shattered. The sky lit up with streaks of gunfire. Explosions flashed across the horizon like lightning in a storm. The Juneau's cannons roared back, shaking the decks beneath the sailors' feet. It was chaos, pure confusion in the dark. Ships on both sides fired blindly through smoke and waves. No one could tell where the enemy was coming from, only that the ocean had turned into a battlefield. The Juneau fought fiercely, holding her place among the fleet. Every man on board, from captain to cook, did his part. And through it all, the Sullivans stayed close, side by side, just like they promised. At one point, George shouted across the deck, rallying the men as shells struck nearby. His courage wasn't born from training. It came from something far deeper, the need to protect his family, his brothers, his crew, his home on the sea. By dawn, the first wave of battle was over. The sea was quiet again, but it was not peaceful. Smoke drifted across the water. The Juneau had taken damage, not fatal, but serious. Below deck, the crew worked to patch what they could. The Sullivans, covered in sweat and soot, refused to rest. Albert helped move supplies. Joe assisted the medics. Francis tried to keep spirits up, saying, "Hey, we're still afloat. That's what counts." They didn't know it yet, but the hardest moment was still to come. Later that morning, as the battered Juneau joined the surviving ships to withdraw from the battle, the calm was broken once more. Enemy aircraft were spotted nearby. The crew rushed to battle stations again. Every man knew one hit in the wrong place could end everything. The Juneau tried to maneuver, engines straining, the sea churning behind her. But fate had other plans. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. One moment she was sailing proudly. The next, the world went silent. It was over in an instant. The USS Juneau was gone. When the smoke cleared and the survivors of other ships looked across the water, the Juneau had vanished. Those who saw it could hardly believe their eyes. The ship that had carried 5 brothers, 5 sons of Waterloo, Iowa, was gone beneath the sea. No one could speak. No one could process what had just happened. But the story didn't end there. Some survivors were later rescued from the water days later, exhausted, shaken, and heartbroken. Among them, none of the Sullivan brothers. The Navy, stunned by the loss, began to piece together what had happened. And when the news reached the Sullivans' parents back home, Thomas and Alita, their world stopped. Back in Waterloo, Iowa, telegrams arrived one by one. Each message brought more confusion, more silence. Until finally the truth was delivered. 5 brothers, gone. The story spread across America. Newspapers carried the headline, "The Sullivan Brothers Lost at Sea." And suddenly the nation realized something it had almost forgotten, that behind every victory, there are families who pay a price that can never be repaid. They weren't just names on a list. They were sons, friends, heroes. They were brothers, bound not just by blood, but by love strong enough to face war together. Their sacrifice moved the world and changed the rules forever. Because of the Sullivans, the U.S. military created the sole survivor policy, ensuring that no family would ever have to endure the same loss again. 5 brothers, 1 ship, one story that still echoes through time. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that true courage is love that refuses to break, then don't let it fade into history. Hit subscribe, because these stories of sacrifice, loyalty, and family are what built the America we live in today. When the war ended, most people remembered the great battles, Midway, Normandy, Iwo Jima. But in one small house in Waterloo, Iowa, history wasn't written in victory. It was written in silence. The home of Thomas and Alita Sullivan, once full of laughter, noise, and 5 lively boys, was now still. 5 chairs sat empty at the dinner table. 5 uniforms neatly folded, never to be worn again. And yet, through that heartbreak, something remarkable happened. When Navy officials came to deliver the news in person, neighbors gathered outside in quiet respect. Alida Sullivan, their mother, didn't collapse or cry out. She stood tall and said softly, "My boys did what they wanted to do. They're together. And that's how they wanted it." Her words echoed across the country. They carried not bitterness, but courage, the kind of courage born from love and loss. Soon letters began arriving from all over America. Strangers wrote to the Sullivans, offering prayers, comfort, and gratitude. People sent gifts, flowers, and poems, not because they knew them, but because they felt them. The Sullivan Brothers had become more than soldiers. They had become symbols of family, loyalty, and sacrifice. The loss of the 5 brothers struck so deeply that military leaders knew something had to change. Until then, families could have multiple members serving together, even in the same unit or on the same ship. But after the Juneau, that would never happen again. In 1948, the U.S. government officially adopted what became known as the sole survivor policy. It stated that if a family had lost members in combat, surviving relatives could not be placed in situations of similar risk. It was a promise that no parent would ever again lose every child to war. This policy later saved countless families from the same pain the Sullivans endured. It was written in the shadow of tragedy, but born out of love. To honor them, the Navy christened a new ship in 1943, the USS the Sullivans. It was the first U.S. Navy vessel ever named after more than one person. Painted proudly on her side were the words the brothers had lived by: "We stick together." The ship served for decades in Korea, in the Cold War, and later as a living museum in Buffalo, New York. Visitors who walk her decks today can see photos of the 5 brothers, smiling, standing shoulder to shoulder, young, fearless, and full of life. It's impossible not to feel something when you see their faces. You realize they weren't just heroes in history books. They were ordinary people, just like us, who made extraordinary choices. Their story spread beyond history and into the hearts of millions. In 1944, Hollywood released The Fighting Sullivans, a film that told their story to a nation still at war. It moved audiences to tears and reminded every American of the human cost behind freedom. Decades later, their sacrifice would inspire Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan, a story built on the same moral foundation. One family's loss should never be repeated. When audiences saw the bond between the Ryan brothers, or the commander's mission to bring one man home, they were, in spirit, seeing the Sullivans all over again. Even today, the Navy honors their memory. Every recruit learns about the Sullivans, 5 brothers who embodied what it means to serve together. Their story has become a tradition, told to remind new generations that courage isn't measured by medals. It's measured by the love you refuse to give up, even when the world is falling apart. The Sullivan brothers didn't fight to be remembered. They fought because they couldn't imagine life without each other. And because of that, they will never be forgotten. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe that the meaning of brotherhood, loyalty, and family still matters, then take a moment to honor them. Like, share, and subscribe to keep their legacy alive. Because every time their story is told, their voices echo again across the waves. reminding us that true strength doesn't come from fighting alone. It comes from standing together. More than 80 years have passed since the day the Sullivan brothers set sail together. Time has washed over the world they once knew. New wars have come and gone. New heroes have risen and fallen. But the story of 5 brothers from Iowa still endures. Today in Buffalo, New York, the USS the Sullivans rests quietly in harbor, a living memorial to the brothers who inspired her name. Visitors walk her decks every day. They see the bunks where sailors once slept, the narrow hallways, the silent cannons that no longer fire. And in the ship's museum, 5 faces smile from a black and white photo. George, Francis, Joseph, Madison, and Albert, forever side by side. Some visitors come as tourists, others as veterans, but all leave with a heavy heart and a quiet sense of gratitude. Children ask, "Were they real?" And the guide answers, "Yes, very real." Because history isn't made by legends, it's made by people, real families, real hearts, and real love. Every Navy recruit still learns their story. It's part of what it means to serve, to understand that behind every uniform is someone's son, someone's brother, someone's friend. Their motto, "We stick together," isn't just a phrase painted on a ship. It's a reminder that unity saves lives, that even in the darkest storms, no one stands alone. And in a world that sometimes feels divided, that message matters more than ever. When asked how she found the strength to keep going, Alita Sullivan once said, "The boys would want us to carry on, not with tears, but with pride." And so she did. She traveled the country, meeting with soldiers, families, and schools, reminding people that service isn't just about battle. It's about love, duty, and faith in something larger than yourself. She became a symbol of resilience, proof that grief could be turned into purpose. Her message still echoes in every memorial built in her son's honor. Don't forget them. Remember what they stood for. In 2017, a new generation of sailors carried that same message to sea aboard the modern USS the Sullivans, DDG-68. Each time she deploys, her crew knows the story behind the name painted on her bow. They know it's more than a ship. It's a promise. And when the flag flutters in the wind, it isn't just cloth. It's memory. It's family. It's brotherhood. The Sullivan brothers didn't live to see peace. But through their love for one another, they gave something far greater. A lesson that still guides us. That real strength isn't found in guns or glory. It's found in loyalty, compassion, and the courage to stand side by side, even when the world falls apart. So, when you think of heroes, remember them. 5 young men who refused to be separated, even by fate. 5 lives that became one legacy. And if you believe stories like this should never fade away, if you believe courage deserves to be remembered, then help keep their memory alive. Like, share, and subscribe. Not for numbers, but for meaning. Because every view, every click, every share keeps the Sullivan Brothers story sailing through time. 5 brothers, 1 promise, a sacrifice that changed a nation, and a legacy that reminds us all to never leave a brother behind.